difference.
Elvis, there have been a lot of rumors about your love life. Did you meet anyone special in Germany?
Not any special one.
For decades, fans thought they knew everything about Elvis Presley, the king of rock and roll. But now, hidden secrets have come to light, uncovering a mystery that changes how we see him. Who was his true love, and what exactly ended his life? Join us as we uncover the finally solved mystery of Elvis Presley. The voices behind the king. When people think of Elvis Presley, they see the confident man with a smooth smile and powerful voice, the one who made crowds scream and dance whenever he stepped on stage. His bright jumpsuits, curled lips, and shaking hips became symbols of a musical revolution that felt entirely his own. To many, he was the king who changed music forever, making rock and roll a worldwide phenomenon. But behind the flashing lights and chart-topping songs was a story that many fans never heard. Elvis did not build his sound in a vacuum. He grew up surrounded by sounds that shaped his spirit long before he set foot in a recording studio. His childhood in the South was filled with the hum of gospel choirs, the rough cries of blues singers, and the soft twang of country musicians who sang about heartbreak and hope. These sounds wrapped around him like a warm blanket, teaching him about rhythm, passion, and soul. They gave him the tools he would later use to capture the hearts of millions. Among the voices that quietly influenced Elvis was a singer named Jimmy Sweeney, a man many have never heard of, yet his voice left a lasting mark on Elvis's career. Sweeney's smooth, heartfelt singing carried a quality that felt personal, raw, and tender. When Elvis discovered Sweeney's recordings, he listened to them repeatedly, absorbing every note, every phrase, every subtle turn of tone. The influence was so deep that it became part of Elvis's own voice, shaping the way he delivered his songs to the world. While the crowds cheered for Elvis, echoes of Sweeney's style lived in the songs that made Elvis a star, even if Sweeney's name remained hidden in the shadows. Another layer of this quiet history connects to a mysterious demo recording of a song called Without You. This song was performed by an unknown singer with a voice so beautiful and moving that it left a young Elvis stunned. This recording carried a haunting depth, a smooth control that Elvis admired deeply, and it became a hidden standard that pushed him to grow and improve his singing. Though he eventually chose songs that better matched his own style, the impact of that mysterious voice remained, weaving itself into the performances that would later fill concert halls and stadiums. Long before these moments, Elvis was shaped by the sounds around him in the streets, churches, and small clubs of the South. The churches filled with gospel hymns, the bustling blues joints, and the small gatherings where musicians played raw and honest songs all played a role in the building of his sound. The people who brought these songs to life were often black musicians and working-class artists who poured their struggles and hopes into their music. They performed for small crowds, sometimes for little pay, creating the rhythms and melodies that would later become the building blocks of Elvis's biggest hits. When Elvis began to rise, the songs and styles he showcased were already familiar in many communities, but it was his image and his ability to bring this music to wider audiences that led to his quick success. Songs like Hound Dog and That's All Right were not new to the world. Hound Dog had been sung by Big Mama Thornton with fiery power, and That's All Right was part of Arthur Crudup's musical journey, yet it was Elvis's versions that received heavy radio play and television time, opening doors for him while many of the original performers remained unrecognized, receiving only a fraction of the credit and financial reward. The world loved the way Elvis moved, the way he sang, and the energy he brought to the stage. But much of what they loved came from the deep roots of Southern music traditions and the uncredited voices who first brought those rhythms to life. This was not just a matter of inspiration, but also a reflection of the times, where racial barriers in the music industry meant that black artists who created groundbreaking sounds often did not receive the recognition they deserved. The industry shaped Elvis's image as a clean, marketable figure who could safely bring the power of black music to a wider, predominantly white audience. Yet those who knew Elvis well described him as someone who deeply respected the musicians who inspired him. He was aware that the sounds he made famous had a history and a life before him, and he valued the artists who created them. However, the fame machine moved fast, focusing all attention on Elvis while leaving behind the stories of the artists who came before him. Fans like to see Elvis as a lone star who created a new world of music all by himself. But the truth is richer and more layered. His voice carried the spirit of Jimmy Sweeney, the mystery singer of Without You, and the many gospel, blues, and country musicians who shaped the sound of the South. Each time Elvis sang on stage, the echoes of these hidden influences were there, even if the world did not see them. But behind all these, there were still some dark sides which people knew nothing about. The heavy crown of Elvis Presley. Amidst his fame, Elvis Presley's journey from a small-town boy to the king of rock and roll felt like a fairy tale to many. Fans saw him as a symbol of success, with crowds cheering his every move, songs topping charts, and his image shining brightly across the world. But behind the glowing lights and thunderous applause was a quiet struggle that slowly began to consume him. Elvis's fame became a heavy crown he could not take off, leaving him trapped inside a world that looked perfect from the outside but was deeply lonely within. In the beginning, performing brought Elvis joy. Singing on stage and watching people dance to his music made him feel alive. But as his popularity soared, the freedom he once enjoyed started to slip away. Managers and promoters decided what songs he would sing and what movies he would act in, planning every detail of his life. Every step he took was carefully watched, with handlers turning his every moment into an opportunity to keep the Elvis brand alive. The excitement that once filled him turned into an endless cycle of shows and appearances, leaving him with little room to breathe. Living in Graceland, Elvis was surrounded by people, yet he often felt alone. Friends from his early days were either pushed away or became part of his close group, known as the Memphis Mafia, who were there to protect him, but also to control what he saw and did. They moved around him, creating a shield that separated him from the outside world. This group, while offering companionship, often made it even harder for Elvis to find real connections and feel like himself. Among those who saw the real Elvis was Priscilla Presley. She shared moments of tenderness and love with him, yet even she could not break the invisible barrier that surrounded him. The fame that had brought them together was also what slowly pulled them apart. The demands on Elvis kept growing, creating a distance that was painful for both of them. Behind closed doors, the couple faced struggles that the world never saw. As Elvis tried to balance the man he was with the image everyone expected him to be. As the pressures of fame increased, Elvis turned to pills to keep up with the demands of his career. At first, they were meant to help him sleep, wake up, and manage the stress of constant performances. But soon, these pills became a routine he could not escape. Doctors, eager to please the famous star, provided him with prescriptions without question. The man who once lit up the stage with his energy slowly became quieter, fighting health challenges that were both physical and emotional. Despite the troubles he faced, the public only saw the Elvis they loved, full of energy, charm, and charisma. On stage, he was still the king, making crowds scream with excitement. Behind the scenes, however, Elvis was battling a growing dependence on substances that drained him of the life he once had. The bright lights hid the cracks, and his team worked hard to protect his image, ensuring that the struggles he faced were kept away from the eyes of his fans. Inside the walls of Graceland, Elvis carried the weight of his hidden pain. The expectations of the world were heavy on his shoulders, and meeting them meant sacrificing his own happiness and health. The fame that once felt like a dream had turned into a cage that was impossible to escape. His energy, once bright and infectious, became overshadowed by the pressures that came with being a legend. So, how about his personal life? Was it as perfect as people thought? Let's find out. The love story that wasn't what it seemed. For many years, people around the world believed Elvis and Priscilla Presley were living a fairy tale. The image of the young rock and roll king with his beautiful bride made it easy to imagine a perfect romance, full of love and excitement. Fans saw the smiles in photographs, the glamorous life at Graceland, and the sweet moments shared in front of flashing cameras. But beneath the glitter and fame, their story was very different from what the world wanted to believe. Priscilla was only 14 when her path crossed with Elvis, who was 24 and already a global star. She was living with her family in Germany, where her father was stationed, while Elvis was there serving in the military. Meeting him was like a dream to many young girls, but for Priscilla, it was the beginning of a life she never truly chose for herself. The age gap, so large and unusual, was ignored by the media. which preferred to paint their story as one of destiny rather than questioning the reality of such a relationship. When Priscilla first visited Elvis's home, it was a moment that many girls would have seen as magical. She passed through crowds of fans just hoping to get a glimpse of him, stepping into a world that sparkled with fame and excitement. But as she moved closer to Elvis, her world began to change in ways she could not fully understand at such a young age. Living under Elvis's watch meant that Priscilla's choices were often made for her. From the way she dressed to the way she carried herself, everything was shaped to fit the image Elvis and his team wanted her to portray. She was young and impressionable, and instead of growing into her own person, she found herself becoming what others expected her to be. The beautiful mansion at Graceland became a golden cage, keeping her away from friends, family, and the normal experiences of a young woman learning about life. From the outside, Graceland seemed like the perfect home, full of luxury and comfort. But for Priscilla, it became a place of deep loneliness. She spent days waiting for Elvis to return from tours and film shoots, and when he was home, their moments together were often overshadowed by the demands of his fame. She was surrounded by Elvis's friends, known as the Memphis Mafia, who were there to protect him, but also controlled the world around him, creating barriers that kept the couple from truly connecting. The birth of their daughter, Lisa Marie, brought a brief sense of hope that their family would bring them closer together. For a while, it felt like there was something to hold on to, something that would strengthen the bond between them. But as the pressures of Elvis's career continued, the struggles within their marriage became harder to ignore. Priscilla found herself trying to be a good mother, while also carrying the weight of being the wife of one of the most famous men in the world. Elvis was often away performing for fans who adored him, while Priscilla was left to manage their home and her own feelings of isolation. The public saw Elvis as a performer full of energy, but behind the scenes he was battling the exhaustion and stress that came with constant touring and maintaining his public image. There was little time or space left for nurturing their relationship, and slowly, the love that once brought them together began to slip away. Over the years, the cracks in their marriage grew deeper. There was no single moment that caused their relationship to crumble, but rather a buildup of unspoken pain, unfulfilled needs, and the constant demands of fame that kept them apart. Priscilla, who had once been a young girl swept off her feet, found herself longing for freedom, for the chance to discover who she was outside of Elvis's shadow. When she finally decided to leave, it was not out of anger or hate, but because she knew she could no longer live in a world where she had no room to grow. She wanted to create a life for herself and her daughter that was not defined by someone else's expectations. The decision to leave Elvis was one of the hardest she ever made, but it was also the beginning of a journey toward finding her own identity. Their separation marked the end of the public fantasy that so many fans held on to. It showed the world that even the most glamorous lives could be filled with heartbreak and quiet struggles. The illusion of a perfect marriage at Graceland faded, leaving behind the truth of two people who loved each other but could not overcome the challenges that fame and personal struggles placed in their path. Elvis continued his life in the spotlight, but without Priscilla, there was a sense of emptiness that surrounded him. The pressures of his career, combined with personal battles, created a weight that became harder to carry alone. For Priscilla, the end of their marriage was the start of a new chapter, where she could finally learn who she was beyond being Elvis Presley's wife. Years later, Priscilla would reflect on her time with Elvis, acknowledging the deep love they shared while also recognizing the challenges that fame brought into their lives. She spoke about the difficulty of living in a world where every moment was public, where sharing a life with someone so famous meant sacrificing parts of herself that she could never fully reclaim. The quiet end of Elvis Presley. To the world, Elvis Presley was still the king. His voice had shaped an entire generation, and his presence on stage made fans scream with excitement. Even in his final years, people continued to pack arenas, hoping to catch a glimpse of the man who had changed music forever. But behind the gates of Graceland, the reality of Elvis's life was much different from the image that filled magazines and television screens. As the 1970s drew to a close, Elvis was struggling in ways that few truly understood. His health was fading, both physically and emotionally, and every day was becoming harder for him to face. Years of constant performing, the weight of heartbreak, and a growing dependence on prescription medication had left their mark on him. The slender young man with bright eyes was now a heavier figure, with tired eyes that often revealed the exhaustion he carried inside. Graceland, once his safe place away from the spotlight, became a quiet cage that kept him away from the world. In his final months, Elvis rarely stepped outside the walls of his home, choosing instead to stay within the grounds, away from the crowds that still adored him. It was a world of soft hallways and quiet rooms, filled with memories of better days that felt distant and unreachable. Even though he was unwell, Elvis continued to push himself to perform. He traveled from city to city, stepping onto stages to sing the songs that people loved, trying to keep the energy alive even as it drained him further. His fans saw the sparkle of the performer they cherished, but behind the stage curtains, the truth was different. Rehearsals were becoming shorter, and new songs were rarely added to his performances. The energy that once poured out of him so easily was harder to find, and the excitement of performing was often overshadowed by the struggle to keep going. Those close to him saw the changes that others could not. They saw the moments when he would sit quietly, lost in thought, battling the aches and pains that came from years of living under pressure. The people around him whispered about his condition, worried about the man they cared for, but the machine that kept Elvis Presley performing was too big to stop. The world wanted the king, not the man who was tired and in pain, and so the reality of his health was hidden away to keep the image alive. The walls around Elvis were not just physical ones. They were built from years of expectations, obligations, and the constant demand to be the Elvis the world wanted. The people managing his career needed him to keep performing, to keep being the star that the world loved, and so the truth of his decline was carefully kept away from the public eye. Only a few people saw the long nights when sleep would not come, the moments of confusion, and the sadness that crept into his quiet moments. Elvis felt the weight of his struggles, and at times, he spoke of wanting to slow down. He dreamed of stepping away from the constant demands, of finding a quieter life where he could focus on his health and perhaps return to making films. But the dreams of a quieter future were often drowned by the reality of the obligations he faced, the need to keep performing for his fans, and the expectations that surrounded him. There were moments when those who cared about him tried to help, hoping to guide him toward a healthier path. But the cycle he was trapped in was difficult to break, and the walls around him were strong. The burden of being Elvis Presley was heavy, and it was a burden that few could understand. On August 16, 1977, the world was shocked to learn that Elvis Presley had passed away. Fans around the world mourned the loss of their idol, the king who had given them so much joy through his music and performances. The official cause of death was heart failure, but those who knew him understood that it was the result of years of emotional and physical struggle that had worn him down. In his final days, Elvis's life was filled with quiet moments that were far from the bright lights of the stage. There were the sleepless nights, the medications that he relied on, and the deep solitude that came from living a life where every moment was watched and every action was judged. The man who had once been filled with energy and excitement was left facing the quiet reality of his struggles, away from the cheers of the crowds. Elvis Presley's death was more than the passing of a music legend. It was a reminder of the heavy price that often comes with fame, the silent battles that are fought behind closed doors, and the struggles that even the brightest stars cannot escape. His life, which had brought joy to millions, ended in quiet sadness, leaving behind questions that would linger for years. What if Elvis had found a way to step back from the demands of fame? What if he had been able to find the peace he longed for, away from the constant pressures of being a global icon? What if those around him had been able to break through the walls and guide him toward a different path before it was too late? The legacy of the legend. Elvis Presley is often thought of as the king of rock and roll, representing energy, charm, and a new era of music. He had a powerful voice, mesmerizing dance moves, and a captivating smile that left a lasting impression. Fans viewed him as the embodiment of the American dream, a guy from modest roots who became a worldwide icon, winning over fans of all ages. Elvis wasn't only a performer, he revolutionized music and pop culture forever. His music became integral to people's lives, and his concerts made ordinary days feel special. Watching him perform was like seeing someone unstoppable, spreading joy with every song and dance. His iconic sequined jumpsuits and confident stance became a representation of success. This narrative was widely accepted for many years. However, beneath the glamorous facade, a separate narrative was unfolding in secrecy. Over time, scholars and historians started to reveal the undisclosed aspects of Elvis's life that were overshadowed by fame. They found a complex web of decisions made on his behalf, ideas taken without acknowledgement, and aspirations stifled by those overseeing his professional life. Elvis Presley's music and fashion were heavily influenced by the soulful sounds of gospel, blues, and rhythm and blues, which originated from talented black musicians who were often not given enough credit. Elvis became a huge star thanks to his voice and unique style, which were inspired by the work of these artists who were unfortunately not recognized for their contributions. Although Elvis appreciated and was influenced by these genres, he was often seen as the sole creator, overshadowing the artists who actually laid the groundwork for his success. Colonel Tom Parker, Elvis's manager, had a lot of control over him. Parker's decisions were not always in Elvis's best interest but were more focused on making money. Elvis was pushed into doing lots of tours and movies, leaving little time for him to pursue his creative ambitions. He wanted to grow as an artist, take on new challenges, and share his talents with the world, but many of those opportunities were kept from him. Elvis Presley faced many challenges in his personal life that were not often visible to the public. The stress of always performing and being famous took a toll on his physical and mental well-being. In order to cope with the demands, he started using prescription substances, which eventually led to an addiction that had negative effects on his health and overall happiness. Despite his energetic persona on stage, there were times when he struggled with feelings of fatigue and isolation, isolated within the confines of his home, Graceland. Elvis was viewed as a hero by many people around the world. He appeared to have it all, but he was actually struggling with sleepless nights, personal battles, and abandoned dreams. Those close to him remained quiet, either not wanting or not able to help him break free from a life that was consuming him. The untold truth behind the final years of Elvis Presley. After nearly 50 years since Elvis Presley passed away, Dr. George Nicopolis admitted his involvement in Elvis's life. He finally revealed what he knew, bringing some closure and reopening old wounds. His confession sparked a wave of emotions and thoughts worldwide. Fans of Elvis Presley, who had idolized him for years, were greatly impacted by the recent admission. It stirred up painful recollections of his passing in 1977. The new details they learned contradicted their former beliefs and made them rethink what had occurred. Many fans were deeply moved when they considered Elvis's struggles and how much information was hidden from them. The sorrow was especially strong for those who had believed in a more innocent story. However, not only sadness was felt by people, many also experienced feelings of anger. Some fans were puzzled and disturbed that a doctor, who was supposed to look after and assist Elvis, could have allowed such harm to happen. They wondered if Elvis had been betrayed by the people he relied on the most. These worries were voiced passionately, especially online. People wanted someone to be held accountable, no matter how much time had passed. They were determined to prevent a similar incident from happening again, whether it involved a celebrity or anyone else. Some individuals forgave Dr. Nick for his errors because they saw his admission as a display of regret and bravery. They believed he genuinely cared for Elvis and did his best to assist him. These supporters chose to release their anger to prevent further suffering. They preferred to remember Elvis for his music, charisma, and the joy he brought, rather than focusing on the sadness of his final days. Dr. Nick's confession gave fans a chance to feel closure with compassion instead of anger. People all over the world responded to the news, making the medical field take notice. Experts talked about the tough ethical choices when treating famous people, wondering if being famous affects the level of care given. There were worries about doctors possibly putting a celebrity's wishes before their well-being. It was clear that it's important to have clear boundaries and put health before fame. After the confession, people started talking in different places about how to protect patients and doctors from the power of being a celebrity. The Presley family reacted to the confession in their own private way, since they are known for being quiet and careful with what they say in public. Even though they didn't share all of their feelings with the public, many tried to picture what they might be going through. To them, Elvis was more than just a famous singer. He was a father, an ex-partner, a son, and a person with hopes and fears. The idea that improved healthcare might have kept him alive was deeply upsetting for his loved ones. Nonetheless, they recognized the lifestyle he lived, the choices he made, and the challenges he faced. The revelation triggered a flood of emotions for them, including sadness, reflection, and perhaps a feeling of finality. Media outlets wasted no time in reporting on the story, with headlines everywhere. Television shows showcased old clips of Elvis and discussed the impact of the confession. Social media was filled with memories, theories, and arguments. Even younger fans who only knew about Elvis from books or documentaries were also swept up in the emotions. It seemed like everyone paused to think about the impact his life had. Many wondered if Elvis could have lived longer if he had received better care. While we can't say for certain, a lot of people believed he would have. If someone had stepped in earlier to stop the pills, reduce the stress, or provide assistance in a different manner, he might have lived longer. He could have grown old gracefully, continued to sing, and seen his influence grow. This idea is hard to think about, but it inspires us to prevent similar tragedies from happening again. What do you think about this solved mystery about his final years? Do you think Elvis would have lived longer if different measures were taken? Share your thoughts in the comments and do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.